Alone at night, when the world is quiet, the real horrors begin to crawl in. Tonight, we uncover 6 creepiest true stories of nights alone gone wrong. I never used to be afraid of being alone at night. For as long as I could remember, I actually liked the quiet hours when the world seemed to shut down. Neighbors went to sleep, cars stopped rushing past, and even the air outside slowed, heavy and still. My house wasn't anything special, just a modest single-story place on the edge of town. But I always felt safe there. That night, though, something was different. It started with the silence, not the regular kind, the soothing hush after a long day, but the kind of silence that weighs on you. Too deep, too absolute. It was just past midnight, and I had shut off the TV, letting the afterglow of the screen fade into the dark. Normally, I'd hear a few crickets chirping in the yard, or the faint buzz of a streetlight through the window. But that night, nothing. The silence was thick, oppressive. I stood in the living room with a mug in my hand, debating whether to make some tea before bed. And that's when I realized the house felt like it was listening. I shook the thought away. Lack of sleep, probably. I'd had long hours at work, and I wasn't thinking straight. Still, I couldn't ignore the knot that had formed in my chest. That's when I heard it. Tap. Soft, sharp, coming from the back of the house. I froze, every nerve in my body straining. My back door leads out to a small wooden deck, and when someone steps on it, the boards always creak. But this wasn't a creak. It was precise, deliberate, like the sound of a fingernail against glass. I held my breath. Tap, tap, again. My pulse thudded in my ears as I crept toward the kitchen, my bare feet whispering against the floorboards. The moonlight spilled faintly through the curtain over the door, casting pale shapes across the floor. I reached for the curtain, my hand trembling. Slowly, I pulled it back. Nothing. Just the faint reflection of my own face in the small square of glass. Then tap, tap, tap. 3 sharp strikes, faster this time. I yanked the curtain closed, heart hammering. I gripped the counter like it could anchor me to reality. Maybe it was a tree branch, maybe the wind, anything but the alternative. That someone was standing on the other side of that door, waiting. I told myself to go back to bed, to ignore it. But then came the scrape, a long, slow drag across the glass. And I knew. Whatever was outside wasn't the wind. I backed away from the door, not daring to look again. The silence pressed in, thicker now, as though the air had grown solid. I reached for the light switch and flicked it. Nothing. The bulb overhead stayed dead. Panic rippled through me as I darted into the living room and tried the lamp. Dark. I smacked it, flicked the switch again. But the house remained lifeless. The power was out. And then, in that suffocating quiet, I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Not outside. Inside the house. I ran. I don't even remember making the choice. My body just moved. I bolted down the hallway into my bedroom and slammed the door behind me. My hands shook so hard I fumbled the lock twice before it finally clicked. I snatched my phone off the nightstand. Relief surged as the screen lit up. No signal. I tried again. Nothing. No Wi-Fi. No bars. Like the world outside the house had been cut off entirely. And then, the doorknob rattled. A soft turn, back and forth. Not forceful, not violent. Just testing. I stumbled backward until my legs hit the bed. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Whoever, or whatever, was in the house wasn't in a hurry. They were patient. They wanted me to know they were there. The knob stilled. silence returned, and then came the whisper. Right at the crack of the door. My name. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. My heart thundered so loud I thought it might give me away. The whisper didn't come again. But I couldn't shake the certainty that something was on the other side, listening to me breathe. Time blurred. Minutes, maybe hours, slipped by as I sat there in the dark, staring at the door, phone clutched to my chest. My eyelids grew heavy, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, it was to the faint sound of click. The lock, the doorknob turned. Slowly, the door creaked open. I scrambled backward onto the bed, pressing myself against the headboard as the dark shape filled the doorway. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The figure was tall, too tall. Its head nearly grazed the frame. Moonlight from the window revealed nothing. No features, just a shape, like the shadow of a person, but darker than the night itself. Didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, and then it stepped inside. Instinct took over. I lunged for the window, fumbling with the latch, and shoved it open. The night air hit me like a slap. I didn't care about the drop. I just needed out. Behind me, the floor groaned as the thing moved closer. I threw myself through the window, crashing onto the cold grass outside. Pain shot up my arm, but I pushed to my feet and ran. Barefoot, in nothing but pajamas, I sprinted across the yard, gravel cutting into my skin. I didn't look back. Not until I reached the road. And when I did, my stomach turned to ice. The house was dark, silent, still. But at the window, the same one I'd just jumped from, something was watching me. A black shape, unmoving, patient, like it knew this wasn't over. I didn't stop running until I reached the neighbor's porch. I pounded on the door until my knuckles bled, sobbing, gasping for breath. When they finally opened the door, their confusion turned to horror at the sight of me. The police came. They searched the house from top to bottom. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no damage, nothing. They told me it must have been a dream, a sleep paralysis episode, stress, hallucinations. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And sometimes, late at night, when the world goes silent, I swear I hear it again. The tap against the glass, waiting for me to be alone. The house phone rang at 12:17 a.m. I don't even know why I still have the damn thing. Nobody calls me on it. Not since my parents stopped using landlines. Not since robocalls fizzled out years ago. It sits on a side table in the hallway, like a relic from another time, gathering dust. But that night, it rang. The sound cut through the silence of the house like a knife, shrill and metallic, echoing too loud in the dark. I froze where I sat on the couch, my laptop dimming into sleep mode in front of me. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then it rang again. I got up slowly, the floorboards creaking under my feet, and padded toward the hall. The old phone glowed faintly, its cracked plastic casing lit by the green of the caller ID. No name, just a string of numbers that made no sense. 000-000-0000. My stomach tightened. Still, I answered. Hello? Static, at first, just a faint hiss, like an untuned radio. I almost hung up. Then, beneath the crackle, something stirred. A voice, low, breathless, barely audible. You're holding the phone. I froze. My pulse jumped. The voice, it was mine. I didn't mean similar, Didn't mean close. It was my voice. Same tone, same cadence. Like listening to a recording of myself. I tried to laugh it off, though my throat was dry. Who was this? Some kind of prank? More static. Then, you're standing in the hallway. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. My hand tightened around the receiver. I glanced down the dark corridor toward the living room, half expecting to see someone standing there. I forced myself to speak, to break the spell. If this is a joke, it's not funny, the voice whispered again, this time with a strange urgency. You're not alone. I dropped the receiver. It clattered against the table, the hiss of static spilling into the air like a living thing. I staggered back, chest heaving. My eyes darted toward the living room, the kitchen, the shadows stretching across the walls. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. But the silence felt wrong. I grabbed my cell phone from the couch. It had service. I should have called the police right then, but embarrassment stopped me. What would I even say? Hi, yes. My landline just called me with my own voice and told me I'm not alone. They'd send me for a psych evaluation. The static from the hall phone grew louder, swelling, filling the house. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed over, snatched up the receiver, and slammed it back into its cradle. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned, ready to retreat back to the safety of my bedroom, when something in the corner of the living room caught my eye. The TV. It was on. I hadn't turned it on. I know I hadn't. But there it was, glowing faintly in the dark, static crawling across the screen. I stepped closer, my skin prickling. For a moment I saw nothing but snow. Then, shapes began to emerge. Shadows. Lines. Like a camera feed resolving into focus. And then I saw myself, sitting on the couch, just like I had been minutes ago. Same clothes, same posture. Only, this version of me wasn't moving. It was staring, straight ahead, at me. My reflection on the screen smiled. I stumbled backward, knocking into the coffee table. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the rug. The image flickered, breaking into static again. When it cleared, the screen was blank. Just snow. I ran. I locked myself in my room, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I sat on the floor, back pressed against the bed, staring at the door. I told myself it was a dream. Stress. Exhaustion. That's all. Then the landline rang again. This time, the sound was muffled, distant, like it wasn't in the hallway anymore. Like it was inside the walls. The ringing grew louder, closer, until it was right outside my door. I held my breath. The ringing stopped. A long pause followed. Then the phone inside the wall spoke again, through a haze of static. "You're holding your cell phone." I nearly dropped it. The voice continued. My voice, calm and deliberate. "You're locked in your room." But the door will open. Soon, the air felt like ice. My throat burned with panic. "What do you want?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to. The reply came instantly. "To come in." I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours. The house was dead quiet again, but I didn't dare move. My phone battery ticked lower, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. At 3 a.m. exactly, my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown caller. I nearly threw it across the room. The screen lit up, and though I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't. My thumb moved on its own. I answered. Static filled my ear. "You're breathing too fast," my voice said. "Calm down." Tears welled in my eyes. My hands shook violently. The voice chuckled. My chuckle. "You don't have to be afraid." I'm already inside. The door creaked. Slowly, the knob turned. "No," I whispered. My voice cracked. The lock clicked open on its own, and there it was. A figure, stepping into the faint glow of my phone screen. Tall. Wrong. Wearing my face, but stretched, distorted. Its grin was too wide, its eyes too dark. It held the landline receiver in its hand, pressed it to its ear. And as it stepped closer, the static swelled, filling the room, drowning everything else. The last thing I remember before the world went black was my own voice, whispering in perfect unison with it. "You're not alone." I woke in the morning on the bedroom floor, the phone still clutched in my hand. The sunlight streaming through the blinds made everything look absurdly normal. The landline in the hall sat quiet and lifeless. The TV was dark, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone ever being there. But when I checked my cell phone log, my blood ran cold. There was one call made at exactly 3 a.m. The recipient? My own number. When I first rented the apartment, I thought I'd gotten lucky. It was cheap for the city, and though it was a little run down, it had charm. High ceilings, creaky wood floors, a balcony off the bedroom. My favorite part, though, was the big living room window. It stretched almost the entire width of the wall, framed by heavy curtains, looking out onto the quiet street below. The first night I moved in, I stood at that window for a long time, watching headlights sweep across the asphalt, hearing the distant hum of traffic. It made me feel connected, less alone. I never imagined that same window would become the reason I don't sleep anymore. It was a Tuesday night, around midnight. I was sprawled on the couch with my laptop, a half-empty mug of coffee going cold on the table. The city outside had quieted to a low hum. That's when I noticed something strange. The window wasn't showing the street. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked, rubbed them, leaned closer. But no, clear as day. The glass wasn't reflecting headlights or lampposts. It was reflecting inside. I stared at myself sitting on the couch, my laptop, my mug. Every detail mirrored perfectly. Except I wasn't moving. The me in the window sat upright, eyes locked on me, a faint, unsettling smile stretching across its face. I dropped my laptop onto the cushions and waved my hand. Nothing. The reflection didn't move. It just kept smiling, wide and unblinking. My chest tightened. I got up slowly, walked toward the glass. My reflection me tilted its head just slightly, as if amused. I raised my hand again, inches from the glass. The other me raised nothing. My voice cracked when I whispered, "What the hell?" The reflection's smile widened. I backed away fast, bumping into the coffee table. My mug toppled and shattered, coffee spilling across the floor, but I barely noticed. The reflection me leaned forward, pressing its face close to the glass, still smiling. Its eyes didn't blink. I bolted to my bedroom, slammed the door, and crawled under the covers like a child. For hours I lay there, heart pounding, listening. The silence stretched on and on. When I finally worked up the courage to peek, dawn light was spilling through the cracks in the curtain. The window looked normal again. Street outside, cars, pedestrians. But I swear I saw a faint handprint pressed into the glass, on the inside. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress from work, too much caffeine. Maybe I dozed off and dreamed it. But the next night, it happened again. Midnight. The window turned inward. This time, the reflection didn't smile. It moved. When I shifted on the couch, it stayed still for a beat, then copied the motion, like a lagging video feed. When I stood, it remained seated, then slowly rose to follow. It was wrong. too slow, too deliberate. I whispered, "Stop." It froze. Then, deliberately, it shook its head. I stopped sitting in the living room at night. I avoided the couch, avoided looking at the window altogether. But the thing didn't stop. At 12 a.m. sharp, no matter where I was in the apartment, I'd hear it. A faint tap on the glass, like fingernails. Sometimes I caught glimpses out of the corner of my eye, my own face staring in from the window, watching. Once, I woke up in bed to find the reflection standing outside on the balcony, smiling. I couldn't take it anymore. One night, I grabbed a heavy blanket, marched into the living room at 11:55 p.m., and planted myself in front of the window. When midnight struck, the glass shimmered, like heat off asphalt, and there it was again. My reflection, sitting on the couch, grinning, my fists clenched. "What do you want?" I shouted. The reflection tilted its head. Then, slowly, it raised a hand and pointed at me. The room seemed to tilt. My knees weakened. Then it mouthed something. 3 words. "Let me in." I should have left. Should have packed my bags, fled, never looked back. But I didn't. Something in me needed to know. The next night, I sat in the living room again, staring at the window as the clock ticked down to midnight. When the reflection appeared, it was closer this time, standing at the glass, palms flat against it, grinning wider than ever. The glass began to rattle, faintly at first, then harder, like something pressing from the other side. Cracks spiderwebbed across the pane. I screamed and stumbled backward as the glass exploded inward. Shards rained across the floor, but behind them wasn't the street. It was my living room, and my reflection stepped through. I don't remember much after that. Just static in my head, like my brain couldn't process what was happening. When I woke, the window was whole again. No cracks, no glass on the floor. But the apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. And when I caught sight of myself in the mirror above the sink, my stomach dropped. My reflection blinked a second too late and smiled. I never liked this house. It wasn't mine originally. It belonged to my uncle, who passed away suddenly and left it to me. Everyone said I was lucky, inheriting a fully paid-off place while I was still in my 20s. But from the first night I moved in, I had the sense that the house didn't want me there. The place is old. Creaking floorboards, drafty windows, pipes that groan like a wounded animal when the heat kicks in. I told myself those noises were normal, that I'd get used to them. For a while I did. But then came the knocks. It was late, nearly 1 a.m., and I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock in the hall. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks echoed from above me. Knock, knock, knock. I froze, the phone slipping from my hand onto the blanket. The sound hadn't come from outside or from the walls. It was directly overhead. The attic. Now I should explain. The attic has always unsettled me. The hatch is in the hallway ceiling, with a pull-down cord for the ladder. I'd never opened it, never needed to. But from the moment I moved in, I felt like there was something up there, something watching from behind that square of wood. I told myself it was probably the wind rattling something loose, or maybe a branch brushing the roof. I went back to my phone. 10 minutes later, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was slower, deliberate. I sat up, heart hammering, staring at the ceiling. Old house, I whispered to myself. Wood expands, pipes shift. That's all. But then the knocks began to change. They weren't random anymore. They were patterned. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 again. Almost like they were spelling something. My stomach dropped. I didn't move for nearly an hour, waiting, listening. Eventually, the silence returned, and I fell asleep with the light still on. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Work kept me busy, and for a day or two, things were quiet. But on the 3rd night, the knocking came back. Louder. Angrier. Bang. 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 I leapt out of bed, my throat dry. The sound was so heavy the dust drifted down from the ceiling. I stood in the hallway, staring up at the attic hatch. The cord swayed slightly, as though something had brushed past it from above. "Hello," my voice cracked as it left me. The banging stopped. Silence. Then, slowly, one single knock. Knock. I don't know what came over me. Maybe adrenaline, maybe stupidity. But I dragged a chair from the kitchen and stood beneath the hatch. My hands trembled as I tugged the cord. The ladder creaked down with a metallic groan. A cold draft spilled out of the opening, so cold it felt like standing in front of an open freezer. I climbed halfway up, flashlight in hand. "Just insulation," I muttered. "Old boxes. Rats, maybe I shined the light inside." Dust motes swirled in the beam, thick like smoke. The attic was bigger than I thought, stretching into darkness. At first, nothing seemed out of place, just a few covered shapes that looked like furniture draped in old sheets. Then I saw them. Footprints. Small, bare footprints pressed into the dust, leading from the hatch toward the far corner. My skin crawled. They weren't faded either. They were fresh. I swallowed hard, aiming the flashlight where the prints ended. That's when I saw it. Something crouched in the corner, its limbs too long, its body hunched low. It was pale, nearly the same color as the dust around it, and its face, God, its face, was smiling. Not a human smile. Too wide, too many teeth. The beam of my flashlight trembled, and in that flickering light, I swear I saw it blink. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I nearly fell, shoving the chair away and slamming the hatch shut. My chest heaved, my ears ringing with the sound of blood rushing. I stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for something to crash down after me. But nothing came. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next. I tried convincing myself I was hallucinating from lack of rest, that I'd imagined the figure. But the knocks kept coming. Every night. Sometimes soft, sometimes so loud the ceiling rattled. Then came the whispers. At first, faint, almost like wind. But soon I could hear them clearly. Murmurs right above me, words I couldn't quite make out. They grew bolder, louder, until one night, as I lay paralyzed in bed, I heard my own name hissed from the attic. That was enough. I couldn't stay. I packed a bag and left the house that night, driving until the sun came up. I didn't care where I ended up, I just needed to be away. But here's the thing. I stayed at a motel miles away, doors locked, TV on for comfort. I finally started to drift off, telling myself I'd escaped. And then, just as I closed my eyes, from above me, faint but unmistakable, knock, knock, knock. When I first moved into that basement apartment, I thought I'd gotten a good deal. Rent was cheap, utilities included, and it was close enough to work that I could walk. The place was small, one narrow room with just enough space for a bed, a dresser, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom tucked in the corner. The landlord warned me that it could get damp in the winter, but I didn't care. I was desperate to get out of my old place, and this one seemed like a decent step up. The first night there, though, I couldn't sleep. The basement was colder than I expected, and the walls seemed to groan and sigh like a living thing. I'd just finished unpacking my clothes, shoved the last box under the bed, and collapsed on the mattress when I heard it. A sound. At first I thought it was the pipes. Old buildings make noises, I reminded myself. But then I froze, because the sound wasn't coming from the walls or the ceiling. It was coming from directly beneath my bed. Breathing. Not steady, not calm breathing either. It was ragged, wet, like someone trying to hold it in but failing. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my body stiff, ears straining. My mind scrambled for explanations, maybe air moving through the vents or water in the pipes. Finally, I grabbed my phone, thumb fumbling for the flashlight. With my heart hammering, I leaned over the side of the bed and shone the light down. Nothing. Just shadows, dust, and the cardboard box I'd shoved underneath. I laughed nervously to myself, shaking my head. "Get a grip," I muttered. "First night in a new place." That's all I eventually fell asleep, convincing myself it was all in my head. But it wasn't. The next night, it happened again. Around 3 a.m., the sound started. Faint at first, then unmistakable, breathing. This time I sat up, eyes wide open, staring at the floor. I didn't dare look under the bed again. Instead, I pressed my ear against the mattress, trying to convince myself I was hearing my own breath echoing back somehow. But no, the rhythm was different. Whoever, or whatever, it was breathing slower than me. Deeper. I spent the rest of the night with my back against the wall, lights on, watching the bed like it might rise up and walk across the room. When the sun finally came up, I told myself it had to be my imagination. Stress, maybe. The basement was damp and moldy in spots. Maybe it was affecting me. But by the end of the week, the sound had become a nightly occurrence. Always around the same time. Always from under the bed. And then it escalated. The whispers started on Friday night. I'd managed to doze off despite the usual breathing when I woke with a start. The sound was different this time. Lower. More deliberate. It wasn't just breath anymore. It was words, murmurs, too soft to make out, like someone chanting just beneath me. I clutched my blanket to my chest, every muscle in my body locked. My mind screamed at me to get up, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I just lay there, heart pounding, while the whispers slithered into my ears. At some point, I must have passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through the tiny basement window, and everything seemed normal again. But I couldn't shake it. I knew something was down there. Saturday night was the breaking point. I'd had enough. Before going to bed, I crouched down and checked under the frame thoroughly. I pulled out the boxes, swept away the dust, shined a flashlight into every corner. Nothing. Feeling foolish but slightly relieved, I climbed into bed. But around 3:12 a.m., I remember the exact time because I stared at my phone in disbelief. I heard it again. Breathing. Louder this time. Strong enough that I could feel it vibrate through the mattress. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no!" I grabbed my phone again, flashlight trembling in my hand, and forced myself to look. And that's when I saw them. Two pale, glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness under the bed. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The eyes didn't blink. They didn't move. They just watched. Then, slowly, a smile appeared beneath them. Wide. Too wide. Teeth glinting like shards of broken glass. I screamed, bolting upright, nearly throwing my phone across the room. The light flickered, casting wild shadows, and in that split second of darkness, I heard it move. A scrape, a shuffle. By the time I dared look again, the eyes were gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I stuffed clothes into a bag and fled. I didn't even stop to grab my boxes or check the bathroom. I never went back. The landlord called me weeks later, asking if I planned on returning for my things. I told him to keep them, donate them, burn them. I didn't care. He sounded confused, but didn't press me. But here's the thing. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed in my new apartment, I think I hear it again. That same ragged breathing, like it followed me, like it's still under my bed, waiting. I've always hated storms at night. Something about the way the wind rattles the windows and the rain pounds against the roof makes me feel trapped, like the world outside has vanished. On that particular night, the storm was worse than usual. Sheets of water blurred the view through my windows, and every few minutes a flash of lightning illuminated the woods behind my house, like a cruel camera flash. I live alone in a small place on the edge of town. People warned me not to buy it. Too far from neighbors, too close to the woods, too quiet. But that's what I liked about it. I wanted peace. I wanted space. Until that night. It was just after midnight when I heard the first knock. Not the front door, the back. I froze on the couch, remote in hand, the muted glow of the TV painting the room in ghostly light. I thought at first it was thunder, but then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My back door isn't one people normally use. It opens onto a narrow stone path that winds straight into the forest. Delivery guys never come that way. Friends don't either. So who the hell was out there? I muted the TV, my ears straining. The rain was hammering hard, but I could still hear it. 3 more knocks, steady and patient. I grabbed a flashlight from the coffee table drawer and crept into the kitchen. My heart was thudding so loudly, I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. The glass pane in the back door was fogged, covered in beads of rain. I hesitated, then wiped it with my sleeve, and I almost screamed. Someone was standing there. A tall figure, drenched from the storm. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could make out the broad outline of his shoulders, the long arm that slowly lifted and knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. I stumbled back, breath shallow. "Who's there?" I managed to croak. No answer. Just silence, broken by the storm. And then, with dreadful slowness, the figure leaned closer to the glass. Lightning split the sky behind him, illuminating his face for a fraction of a second. What I saw didn't look right. His eyes were too wide, too dark. His grin stretched impossibly long. I staggered backward, the flashlight shaking in my grip. "Go away," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. Another flash of lightning lit the yard. He was gone. I locked the back door, shoved a chair beneath the handle, and retreated to the living room. My nerves shot. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a storm-addled imagination. But when I finally crawled into bed hours later, I heard it again. Not at the back door this time, at my bedroom window. Knock, knock, knock. My blood ran cold. The window was just a few feet from my bed, covered only by thin curtains. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knock came again, louder. Knock, knock, knock. I forced myself to reach for my phone, hands trembling, and dialed 911. But before I could hit call, a voice whispered through the glass. "I see you." I dropped the phone. My stomach lurched. My skin prickled. Every hair on my body stood on end. I ripped the curtains open, flashlight beams stabbing through the rain. Nothing. Empty yard. Trees swaying in the storm. No one was there. But the glass was wet with the clear imprint of a hand. The police came 20 minutes later. They searched the yard, the woods, even checked the muddy path for footprints. Nothing. Not a single trace of anyone. They told me it was probably just some drunk, maybe a prankster trying to scare me. They said to keep the doors locked and call again if it happened. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear that voice. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept every light in the house on, the flashlight clutched in my hand. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The next night, the storm had passed. The woods outside were quiet. Too quiet. I tried to distract myself with TV, but every shadow in the house seemed deeper, every creak of the floor louder. By midnight, my nerves were frayed. And that's when the knock came again. This time at the front door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I froze. He's back. I crept to the door, flashlight shaking, and peered through the peephole. Empty porch. I backed away, swallowing hard. My phone was in my hand again, thumb hovering over the emergency number. Then came the second knock. Not at the front, not at the back, not even at the windows. It came from inside the house, behind me. Knock, knock, knock. These were 6 terrifying true stories of nights alone gone wrong. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own scary experience in the comments below.